Walla River is blessed with mystical water, said to be the tears of the Great Spirit by those creatures who hold the legend closely. This river of tears keeps its neighboring land very receptive to growth, strong soil full of life. On this peculiar evening change, while most of the area's creatures rest and sleep, an interrupting asteroid the size of a picture booth lands there on the soft rescue net banks of Walla River. The asteroid is caught by the soil like a large rock tossed in mud, set firmly in its place. Then comes the surprise. The asteroid's door opens. This hunk of rock is actually a transporter in disguise. A space-suited human form scurries out of this curious ship and falls to the immediate ground, frantically digging a small-size hole with a silver spoon. The visitor from space then buries what is considered one form of monetary currency on planet Earth, the dollar bill. Before the day could break, the distant visitor and its asteroid transport were gone from the Walla River Bay. The center returned a few moments before it did 5 rises behind. A hard-working species of oddly oversized red-coated ants are awake for their work as they explore the natural land that rests beside the Wallow River. They gather food and other useful resources needed for the survival of their queen's colony. Unaware to the imminent danger, the ants march closer to where the dollar note had been buried just darker moments ago by the mysterious space traveler. A frictional reaction within the soil of the land begins its shifting quake. The buried dollar bill starts multiplying into many monies, each bill developing roots that grow in every which direction. Some roots anchor themselves into the soil, while other roots join together to form a trunk, pushing itself out from under the ground. From the trunk of this rapidly developing tree, branches reach outwardly, waking up with its big stretch-like growth. Off of the branches sprout more dollar bills like leaves. At the height of its growth, the top branches bloom out snake-style vines that drape down, covering the tree like a weeping shroud. The dark vines pierce into the rich soil and drain the fertile life out of the area, turning it into thin, dry sand. The ants approach this monster of a monument to investigate. The closer they get to it, the more attracted to it they pull, easily becoming the ignorant slaves, their queen included, to this fear-wallow tree. The ants are used to build hourglass traps that are strategically buried down into the sand and will ultimately be used to keep other creatures away from this newly claimed territory. Fazy the Crow finds himself flying. He drifts through a familiar dawn air on his way to the frequently visited Walla River with his friends. They flock closer to the bay in good spirit, but notice something different. "What's that?" pokes Sticky the Woodpecker. "It looks like a tree," says Divvy the Owl. "This tree doesn't look very friendly," mentions Gunner the Falcon. A tree vine attack invades the birds in flight, sending the 4 instantly smack down on the sand floor, breaking their bird wings and preventing a flying getaway. "Scram!" yells Gunner. The Falcon runs for his life, followed by Sticky and Divvy. "Danger!" warns Fazy the Crow. The Falcon steps in the wrong spot, engaging a hidden trapdoor. Gunner and Sticky both fall into an ant-made hourglass container. Divvy barely stops himself from falling into the trap, but his momentum pushes his balance forward. Divvy helplessly tries to wave his broken wings. Fazy rushes over to Divvy and grabs the owl with his crow beak. From out of a fold in the crow's feathers, Fazy's lucky dreamcatcher falls and lands out of reach on the ground near to the trapdoor's opening. Divvy's momentum takes both himself and Fazy down into the hourglass trap. The smell of blood flashes into a temporary blackout. "Elevation," squawks the crow. "We can make it through this ridiculous containing fuss that wrenched out Reproductive's masterpiece." This bursting idea startles the other 3 birds, pulling them from their sentenced-to-death preoccupation. "Marbles are what you have lost," retorts the Falcon. "If I may add to this," questions the Woodpecker, "how can we place hope in your idea when our wings have been snap broken?" Woodpecker struggles to fly with his dangling wings, making his reminding point to the crow that each of them no longer have that obvious option. Owl takes notice. On the other wing, what's the point in being buried here? With his beak, he knocks on what is their hourglass-shaped prison cell. Sand spills down into the high trapdoor opening from out of a hanging hollow tree vine, much like a hose to water. Prisoners of no hesitation's absence inside their burial coffin. The birds become hopeless. The crow continues. We can balance up our files flapjack style to the signals along the wire. Understand my vibration, it is the most honest one I have. The others stare back at the crow in a way that not necessarily deems madness, but wishes they could only understand what he's trying to say. The crow paces back and forth. Frustrated by his own nonsense, he pulls out from its feathers a hidden gray crescent moon flask with his beak tightly clamped to the curved lid. Using his right foot, he opens the flask, freeing it from its lid. He drops the lid to his feet and drinks some of the liquid down his throat, reacting with a strong liquor hiss. In good gesture, each of the birds are offered what just may be their last swaggle of the numbing shine. Each of them accepts, also reacting with booze-hound hisses all around. The pile of sand spreads across the bottom of the hourglass. The crow picks up the lid from the flask from the ground with his beak and scrapes it against the side of the rigid glass with the lid's metal point. His sharp chiseling motions create sparks after each lashing, but leave no markings on the glass. From the sparks flow out streams of smoke, turning, swirling into ghostly birdscapes that shape on top of each other, one by one, forming a balanced totem vision. This smoke pattern rises towards the sun, up to the top of the glass trap, and out of the opening where the sand keeps flowing in and down on the pressured captives. Observing the crow's smoke signal code, the owl poses. Imagine that, his lunacy reads just enough sense to me. This might be our way of escape. This mania has infected you also, from the falcon. The owl replies to the falcon. Your doubt has brought no ideas to our hang-up. You must think with the senses of a ladder. If we stack up standing on each other's shoulders, we might be able to at least reach the opening up top and possibly block the sand flow from falling in on us. The owl then situates himself in one place, crouched. Quickly, he says, jump onto my shoulders and stay balanced before we run out of stable ground. Without further sake of debate, Falcon bends low and jumps aboard the owl's shoulders, both of them keeping thoughtful balance. Woodpecker proceeds next with his climb by starting with a swift hop off of the owl's beak, and like a diving board jumper, he springs up and lands on the falcon's hard head, perched on one foot holding his breath. His woodpecker eyes are closed. Over and again he mumbles to himself not to look down. The pile of sand thickens into quicksand and begins its crawl. The crow has already rejoined his flask to its lid and its spot within the fold of one of his wing's feathers. He lunges towards the owl. Off of one foot, Crow steps on the owl's beak and bounces straight up. Using the falcon's shoulders as his next stepping place, he escalates, zooming further upward and lands on 2 feet like he's steady surfing on Woodpecker's strong plank of a beak. The woodpecker stops mumbling to himself, eyes still closed. Down below at the base of their totem, the owl fights to hold in a stirring sneeze. The crow's feathers particularly tickle while passing, of course. Owl struggles to keep a foundation. A sway begins. Washoo! Out comes the sneeze, bringing water blur to the owl's blinking eyes. I can't hold still, yells out the owl, his feet shuffling. Stand strong, shrieks the falcon. Closer to the opening at the top, Crow takes a leap towards it. Silent focus turns to falling squawks. Owl collapses directly to the ground, covering his head with his broken wings as he goes face down. Here comes Falcon on top of Owl, belly flop. Both sound off with out-of-wind grunts. Woodpecker flails down backwards, panic flapping his useless wings. He lands sideways on safer ground, inches away from the still approaching quicksand. Elevation, exclaims the crow. We can make it through this. The birds look up towards the crow's voice coming from the trapdoor opening above. Crow is edging himself up and over the entrance's exit. Ground level. He quickly pulls out his flask again from his feathers with his beak and plugs it into the open mouth of the sand-spouting tree vine, directly blocking its flow of sand. Under pressure, the vine bulges and backs up with sand. Soon the pressure will reverse back up the vine to its given point, and the vine will burst, bringing with it some very unwanted attention. Immediately, the crow searches the ground over and around. "Fazy," calls out the owl, still down in the trap with the falcon and the woodpecker. Fazy caws back. "My dream net was thrown to hidden sides when we dropped." His little crow head peeks down into the trap. "Reach to feel my feathered slack that I will ease down, and our direction will be pluralized." "What did he say?" checks the woodpecker. "He says he's looking for his dream catcher," answers the owl. "He lost it off to the side up there when we all fell through the trap door. He's gonna pluck off enough of his own feathers to tie them together to the feathers that are already on the dream catcher, and then he's gonna use it like a rope to pull us out of here." After several confusing seconds, Woodpecker adds, "I don't know how you understand that crow's nonsense, but it sounds like a good plan to me." "Me too," from the falcon. "As long as we are long gone before we're even noticed," concludes the owl. Burst goes the backed up tree vine, exploding, reaching its given point. Up above, Fazy notices sand spraying into the air, similar to a firework effect. "Danger," announces the crow, lowering his extra feathered dream catcher down like a rope to the anxious three in their hourglass casket. Not too nearby, an ignorant takes attention to the unusual explosion of sand and sends out his antenna transmission alert. He warns the other ants of their out-of-place situation and calls for a roundup. A group of 8 ignorants are sent to resolve it. The rest of the ants resume their thankless work of building more hourglass traps to bury along the banks of the seized Wallow River. Over at the trap, the owl is the last of the birds to be pulled out. He grips on clutching to the crow's feather rope with his feet. The other 3 tug of war the owl up and drag him out feet first. "Let's fall back home," Owl says, letting go of the feather rope as he stands up straight. "Be cautious of more buried traps. We don't know where they could be set." The birds carefully make their steps back towards their home, away from the expanding boundary of the Fear Wallow tree. "My moon," mumbles Fazy with the dream catcher net still in his beak. The crow goes back to the failed trap to retrieve his crescent-shaped moon flask that is now loosely wedged in the mouth of the ruptured vine. He lets the dream catcher rest on his chest, with the feathers swung and draped over his shoulders and down his back along the ground in wedding gown fashion. Fazy swoops up the flask with his beak and returns it to a patch of feathers on his right wing. He makes sure to leave one of the curved ends of the flask sticking out from its spot. He clips the resting dream catcher with his beak to the curved end of the flask so as to anchor the dream catcher to himself. The crow pauses and looks almost through Fear Wallow tree. He dazes about the lonely river that flows behind this uninvited intrusion. Fazy debates to himself whether he should continue on with his original intention of reaching the other side of the tree. He snaps out of his mental moment as he hears the rumbling march of the ignorants closing in. He pursues directly towards the other 3 escaping birds, already many steps ahead of him. His long-feathered dream catcher drags along the sandy ground behind him, sweeping away any footprint tracks. He carries his cruise, leaving no trace. The ignorants arrive to the failed trap and sense that the escapees are not too far off. The ants scuttle towards what is the temporary border that separates the open land from the territorial sand of the Fear Wallow tree. All intentions are to head the birds off at the crossover. Otherwhile, Fazy catches up to his fellow birds. They are slowly walking with great caution to prevent any more falling into buried hourglass traps. My dream net will test the sand, says Faisy, approaching with a suggestion. It is weight enough to reveal any trap mischief. Good thought, says the owl. This will speed up our advancement and get us over to safer land. Faisy uses his beak to unclip his dream catcher from the protruding moon flask, and then he casts the net part of the catcher out in front of them to test the ground for any sensitive trapdoors. His first attempt proves to be a safe one. The birds move forward. The second attempt proves the same as the first, as well as the third casting does. The fourth attempt brings with it the unwanted. Swoosh slides open a hidden door. Faisy beaks on tight to the feathers that are tied to the dream catcher, saving the whole thing from falling to the trap's bottom. Down from above comes the instinctive snake-like tree vine, already spraying sand out of its mouth. The vine sets itself to hang over the trapdoor's opening and continues with its full duty of filling the buried hourglass trap up with sand. An intense process witnessed by the birds, this time from the outside of the trap. I say we run for it, from the falcon. The owl questions the falcon. What about the traps, Gunner? How do we get over those? Gunner replies, build a momentum. We are almost to the crossing. The boundary is on the other side of the dune. Danger, warns the crow. Ignorants crawl over the dune and down towards the birds. The ants separate from their single file line so as to surround their victims-to-be. What now, Divvy? Asks the woodpecker of the owl. We fight them, replies Divvy the owl. There's 8 of them, each of them twice as tall as us when they stand, mentions the woodpecker. Quiet, snaps Gunner the falcon. Listen. The birds pause. There's a wind gust coming, continues Gunner. I can hear it whistling through Fear Wallow. I hear it too, from the woodpecker. Let's catch a ride, crows Faisy as he clips his dream catcher with his beak back to the curved part of his moon flask and makes a war cry run for it. Howls yeah, screams out Gunner, breaking into his falcon stride. Standing still, the owl and the woodpecker stare at each other. Well, Sticky, says the owl to the woodpecker, how's the feet? He sprints away without waiting for an answer. Sticky follows behind him. 4 birds momentarily race for their conditioned freedom. Behind these questionable boundaries, their wings have become something they will unquestionably not take for granted anymore. The other side of the dune seems more and more of a reachable finish line to their daring tiptoe dart. Closer they rage on with lost minds. Pulses paddle wildly to an already rapid pump. Squawks of caws sound off with intent for a head-on battle. The ants gain speed. Antenna wave transmissions vibrate with furious length. Every step promises a collision. Whispering sounds are in league with the good timing gust of wind. The birds raise their broken wings up as much as they are able. To the ignorance's surprise, the wind pulls the birds up and over the dune's embankment, lifting them by their not-so-useless after-all wings, like helpless puppets with a very fortunate avoidance. The calming wind drops the birds off on a field of grass well away from the shifting danger. The ignorants return to Fear Wallow, unaffected, to resume their pressured work. I don't believe any of this, from Sticky the woodpecker. Gunner the falcon responds, believe in our victory moment. We're far from home, adds Divvy the owl, a home we flew away from only to come walking back to it. A curse's blessing, remarks Faisy the crow. The taken birds pass their relieving laughter. Sundown. The birds trail through a wooded area. Reaching great heights, the trees lean on each other almost as if holding each other up from bending back downward. Night covers the underneath with a still volume that can clearly be heard. Where are we? Asked Sticky, poking the silence. Fair curiosity from the woodpecker. This is Mount Baldy, answers Gunner. Falcons know their particulars. Wise to the night's warning, Divvy hoots. We should camp for the night. There's a wooden structure just around the trail's bend. Fazy hums a tune in his head. His crow's feet are like rubber bands. Around the bend is the flat wood structure, 2 stories perfect for their bird shelter-swelter. They huddle up behind the wood building for some rest. A bird brainstorming plan for the sun's next rising takes order. Divvy begins. We can continue down the trail when the sun comes back. My brother has a place set in the pines alongside of a brook. It's not too far off. Fazy paces back and forth. Gunner goes next. There's a train that runs through those parts. We can ride it back to our home area. Sounds good, agrees Divvy. Where did Fazy go? Asks Sticky. Not over there, replies the crow to the woodpecker from behind some nearby trees. The birds step over to where Fazy stands directly in the middle of a wild mushroom patch. Fazy carries on. The Great Spirit has offered to us his food for thought here on this dirt plate. All 4 of the birds frenzy into an erupting feast. After many moments, the birds lie down and stare at the stars in the night space. A maze. Sticky opens. I feel like I'm a shoo-in and I'm not even wearing a pair. Chucklemania for the 4, warm in their laughter jackets. Divvy adds, I feel like my wish for teleportation has just been approved. Gunner says with a grin, I feel like all my worries have been erased. They're actually funny like each of our tall faces. Laughter jackets for 3. Fazy lays back silently though. His imagination falls through its own trapdoor. He trails down a nocturnally mission on a popsicle stick boat. His yellow raincoat that he's wearing puzzles him when it fastens on straight, as if he rigged it. He tries to pinpoint the weather, but the mood is as sneaky as a prank that is uncomfortable about having an extra pulse. And clouds for bones, screams out Fazy, coming to his senses almost as if waking up from a helpless nightmare. The other 3 birds startle. What did he say? Asks Sticky of Divvy. He either had a flashback, answers Divvy, or a flash forward. A peek at the future, stirs Gunner. The owl continues. Maybe so. However, we should get up and keep on going until we reach my brother's abode. We can rest there for as long as we need. Each of the other birds agrees, feeling a renewed energy. They continue down the trail in tune with the Great Spirit's creations. The silent path directs the birds to a gravestone cemetery. That's the Electric Circus burial ground ahead, says Divvy. It looks like there's a gathering, from Gunner. A funeral dirge, hopes Fazy, showing his interest. Divvy answers, it looks more like an idea exchange. This evening was exactly that. Different creatures gathered together at this burial ground to exchange their living ideas. Below them, under the ground, many sorts share the idea of death together. The smirking birds enter the area. Davy notices 2 other owls on sight. He approaches peacefully with the others behind him. Happy season, he offers. May we share our experience. By every means, replies one of the other owls. My name is Jama the Owl, and these are my friends Happy Toes the Owl, Hefe the Ferret, Semi the Bulldog, and Clockworks the Falcon. Much respect to each of you, says Divvy. That's Gunner the Falcon, Sticky the Woodpecker, Fazy the Crow, and I'm Divvy the Owl. Each collectively bows their heads. Divvy continues on by telling about their experience with Fear Wallow Tree and its imposing destruction to their land. He finishes with a warning saying, the tree's vines are snake-like. If you walk anywhere in its growing territory, hidden traps that are buried under the sand will keep you away. We managed to escape its danger and we are heading back to our homes to mend our wings. How fast is the tree's progression? Barks Semi the Bulldog. Bustling from a nearby bush brings the gathering to a silence. From out of the green bushels comes another bulldog. Trumpet Nose, hoots Divvy. Division, prompers a laughing Trumpet Nose. Brother of me, what are you doing here? Asks Divvy of the approaching bulldog. I came for tonight's gathering, answers Trumpet Nose, hugging his brother. I was down the hill at Doll's little hut, and I heard there was going to be an ID exchange up here. Divvy reacts. We were on our way to your spot. We stopped here to warn. Here's an idea, says an interrupting voice from above. Why don't you all leave and let us eagles be alone here with our superior thoughts? A group of bald eagles land themselves on chosen gravestones. I thought you birds were extinct, brings Fazy. The loudmouth eagle jumps down off of his stone perch and stands beak to beak with the crow. Fazy furthers. Seriously, make us leave. The eagle spits on Fazy's right wing. Fazy licks it off. One of the other eagles pushes Jama the owl. Another eagle pushes Semi the bulldog. Quiet for now. Tension coils itself tightly. Semi props up on his two hind legs and gavels one of his paws down on the eagle that shoved him, knocking the bird completely across the burial ground. Riot for now. Flapping dust, kicking noise, broken wings grounded. Fazy holds a branch piece in his beak, poking away at any threat from whichever angle. Trumpet Nose the bulldog saves Happy Chose the owl from a pin down. A loud whistle awakens through the trees. Haunting winds warn of their many annoyances. The fighting ceases. Opponents pull to the opposite directions. The eagles return up to their bald mountain. The others head down the hill, leaving the spirits to their peaceful grounding. A cold grip hugs a bottle of liquor. How many revolutions have you seen, Life? Questions Zaidi the shadow. 10 plus 3, answers Panic, the other shadow that grips the bottle. Are you experienced enough with that bottle of liquid shine, urges Zaidi. Enough to know that you are pressing my drink, solves Panic. Zaidi confesses, I admit that I sure could use a swig. The difficult particulars of being a shadow are beating me down. We are the iceberg bandits to a temple's sunlight, casted out into the numbing cold, you know what I mean? I will give you some of my liquid shine, says Panic, even though I know you have already been drinking. I can smell it on your breath. But because you are a fellow shadow, I must admit that I completely relate to what you are saying. Panic holds the bottle out to Zaidi. I know the harm, claims Zaidi. It's much like the air we breathe in. He forms into a human-like shadow and takes the bottle from Panic with one of his shadowed hands. All this urgency to survive is enough to make me want to go anywhere else. So I say, why not wash on by with a drink? It's not like it's a necessity, I think. Zaidi holds the bottle up to his silhouette profile like he's gonna kiss it, but he talks to it instead. Liquid healer, he says, tell me what it takes. How is it we want you so dearly? Panic thinks to himself about how manipulation of the needy impresses him. Zaidi brings a toast. Here's to you, drug syrup. He drinks from the bottle. How far is this train carrying you, checks Panic. Zaidi hisses from the drink and says, until the next big town comes around. What about you, he asks. Panic responds, I'm gonna pass out here in this dark corner until the moon's next turn. He motions over to the corner, taking on no definitive form at the moment, so it appears like a dark blur is crossing the boxcar. He settles himself and becomes the inconspicuous dark corner, saying, you can have what's left of that bottle shine. Much respect, says Zaidi. I figure I'll pass out also after this little bit. Zaidi, still in the shadow likeness of a male human, lifts the bottle into the air with both of his hands like it was a trophy and prays. O great spirit, bring me the ones generous to others. Here's to you, my sisters and my brothers. From the bottle he drinks the remaining liquid. He mumbles something about syrup and then he collapses, blending into his own dark corner. The bottle drops to the boxcar floor and shatters, empty and broken, much like the shadow who hopes to see the moon's next turn reopen. The train sounds off its horn to welcome the sun's return. "There's the train," announces Gunner, posted at the top of a small hill. Divvy responds loudly at the bottom of the hill with a question. "How many boxcars can you see?" The falcon calls back out to the owl. "Looks like 2. Gunner runs down the hill to huddle up to the rest of the birds. Sticky pecks at a tree, and Faisy listens to a rhythm pulsing in his head. "Get ready," warns Gunner. "Train is steady rolling." "Aim for the second boxcar, more towards the rear of the train," says Divvy. The train draws near. Sticky stops pecking at the tree. Faisy's pulse intensifies with no immediate outlet. The train is so close, it invented being close. Darting out from behind a tree, the birds hop up and into the second boxcar with no hassles. "Smooth," sings out Sticky out loud while dancing like water. Gunner wonders, who's gonna believe that we just got back from damn near being killed by the fear wallow tree? "That will seem plenty more than what is already up front to them," agrees Divvy. "No one will believe it," adds Sticky, still dancing. "They are already shoveled in their graves as far as I'm concerned." "I second that," tunes in Faisy. "From there to here, our names have been spilled by the indentions of this detour shanking. Its inconvenience has shown no pardon, so why should I be flurred?" Faisy pulls with his beak his refilled moon flask out from its spot within his feathers. The previously told about shadows are in their corners of the same boxcar, awake but not moving. They remain listening with drunken interest. Panic glances over to the other shaded corner where Zaidi is already peering back at him. Zaidi whispers, "On your mark, get set, go." He then starts to speak ghoulishly loud to the 4 stowaway birds. "You're involved in a striking hallucination." "What was that?" poked Sticky. Gunner looks sharply into the dark corner from where the grumbling voice sounded off. He sees nothing. Faisy questions the unseen voice in the dark corner. "Who do you pretend to be?" "Tuck your questions. Keep them sleeping in your mouth," challenges Zaidi. "We must sample a bit of your sauce." Faisy puts his flask back to the spot in his feathers. Gunner urges, "There's no need to raise a competition." "Cast your request out into that passing lake," roars Zaidi. "Do us a favor and follow it under." Listening closely, Divvy says, "There's more than one." Faisy squawks, "Show yourselves and your glowing eyes to our deepest reflections." Zaidi responds, "We don't comprehend crazy crows, nor do we think that you'll ever comprehend our impish tastes." As vivid as a popped-up page in a book, Panic and Zaidi step out from being the dark corners and form into the shadow shapes of baby devils. "We are the imps resting on your shoulders," adds Panic. "Sinners we are for testing our indulgence." The imp shadows shift quickly in many directions across the boxcar, confusing the birds with their chaos. Faisy's flask gets lifted from its spot in the feathers. To Faisy, it feels like the wind is the guilty thief. Zaidi clutches the moon flask and heads for the open boxcar door. Panic quickly exits the door, laughing. Before Zaidi exits, he turns to the stymied birds and teases on. "You must not have gotten our pamphlet. We avoid wandering behind in thin excitement, but be sure we're gonna make do anyhow. You've just been hit by the iceberg bandits." Zaidi disappears out. Sticky re-asks, "What was that?" "Not sure," answers Gunner. "Those were shadows," Divvy says, now standing at the boxcar door looking out into the open land. "Iceberg bandits," curses the flaskless crow. The 4 birds sit quietly and sulk for the rest of the train ride home. A knock at Divvy the Owl's nest home door. Divvy answers the door to see a wide-eyed, patchy-feathered Faisy standing there. "What's on that mind of yours?" asks Divvy. "A whole universe," replies Faisy, "but for now I will detail everything to this." The crow points with one of his widow's web-casted wings to his newly built space transporter, parked outside on Divvy's lawn. The word Noitulos is painted on the side of the vehicle in green. "That's a nice whatever it is you have there," amazes the owl. Faisy responds using a serious scientific voice. "It's quite simple. I built a mini magnetic control panel inside of this crayon-shaped toy box, and then I wired it up to my portable radio. The musical wavelengths of the radio attract to the vibrations of the magnets that are directionally placed in the console, causing the whole toy box to move as a transporter. A joystick from a video game device plugs into the control panel and is used to steer such a craft. A monitor is linked to a mounted video camera here on the outside nose of the crayon's body." "That's unheard of," chuckles Divvy. Faisy continues, "I'm off to Earth to get to the evil root of this fear wallow. This crafted ship fits about 4 or so. Would you dare to go?" Divvy pauses for a second to lower his head, saying in average dialect, "I'm sorry, Faisy, but I can't leave my family right now. New responsibilities have risen from the surface." He slips into the preferred nonsense slang. "My lady is completely gaming my case. She spits a mean charades when she dribbles her soap opera scripts. The female is highly protective of her plans. She's managed to web herself the ball in hand, and she's boxed in my wig by introducing me to the clock." "I understand," says Faisy, respectfully bowing. "Much praise to you and your lady craze." Divvy then asks Faisy, "How do you stay clear from the games of the lady crazes?" Faisy reasons, "In the game of chess, no queen can check a wizard, because the wizard does not allow himself to be a game piece. This defense builds itself a blocking side out." "Well said, Traditions, Divvy. What can I at least do to somehow help?" Faisy urges, "Put the word out about my trip. I will be blasting off from the 369 points further upstream. This will happen after 5 turns of the moon, and I will only have room for 3 other small creatures who are interested in going." "I will spread the news," agrees Divvy. Faisy jumps into his open hatch spacecraft. The hatch closes. He turns his portable radio on. Music powers up the transporter and sends it zooming magnetically away. His dynamite beats rock, paper, and scissors for sure. 369 Points is a small cliff upstream where everything happens in threes. Special events are held here because of its perfect observatory location. On this particular Moon's Turn gathering, it appears to be a wide event. On top of that cliff stands an inverted top hat set there for tonight's launching. At the bottom of the cliff flows a stream. Out comes Orphantide, the salmon, from that stream, running onto the land. She runs by a couple of Siamese cats. "Hey, sea maid," yells out one of the cats. "Did you take to the waves?" "I sure as hell did," hollers back Orphantide with a big smile, running late, forgetting to bathe. The same cat calls out, "How'd you like to burn some good plant beside me, hot pants?" At this point, Orphantide is running with her back to the catcallers. To her side, with a coding sarcasm, she remarks, "I snooze soufflés." Carelessness is an everyday expectance at these points. There's a built wooden fence for those who choose to perch. Orphantide the salmon hops up onto this fence. She scopes all the around. Sitting there next to her is Faisy the crow with all of his quick-growing feathers completely back intact, his wings still broken. He hands her a note with his foot. The note reads, "We are doomed, let's play that next. You're the broom and I'm the swept." "What's your mystery?" checks Faisy. Orphantide reveals, "I've been alone further than soon, until I was raised by the moon. I've also dismissed most luxuries except for French toast with more butter." Faisy smiles. "And you?" checks the salmon. "What brings a crow and his spider-webbed wings to 369 points?" Faisy pronounces, "I'm here to supersede my overseers." "Why would you go and do something like that?" asks Orphantide. "It's worth the distance," settles Faisy. "Crazy," says Orphantide. "Yeah." Faisy jumps off the fence and sharply disperses. The tall inverted top hat at the cliff's peak has a ladder leaned up against it. Faisy climbs the ladder up to the rim, using it as a platform. The crowd gathers at the bottom of the cliff. Faisy calls out, "We are lifted by our ears and packed into this size of a top hat. Away we will disappear into the air of a freedom-fighting dream that never closes." The crowd cheers and whistles. Faisy jumps down into the top hat launching pad where his musically fueled rocket awaits its takeoff. He opens the hatch with his beak, and to his surprise he sees that he has some willing shipmates. One of them being good old Sticky the Woodpecker, another one being Clockworks the Falcon from the Electric Circus Graveyard Gathering, the last one being Lim, the Lotus Tripper plant. "I am Heifer the Ferret's little brother," the plant introduces itself to Faisy. "My name is Lim. The bee is silent." Faisy responds, "Welcome, Lim," with a silent bee. Faisy starts up the radio, wasting no more time. He closes with his beak the hatch to the ship. The curious crowd below begins to mumble and stir as the top hat starts to shake. "Hold on to the fat on those asses," crows out Faisy. The spacecraft rattles violently. The rolling music vibrates and builds like a spiraling staircase. A few words are spoken. All deep breaths are taken. Poof. What's that sound? Pokes Sticky the woodpecker. A knocking tone of help comes from a metal storage box used to contain certain instrument weapons. Clockworks the falcon flips the attachless lid, opening the box with functional wings. Stowed away in this metal box is Orphantide, the salmon from the 369-point stream, and her newcomer daughter, Taser the coinkiting flower. Allow us to apologize for our caper cues, Orphantide, but we are tuned into this sort of travel and would love to join in on such happenings. The two hiders leap out of the weapons box. Oh, mama's brother, disbelieves Faisy, steering the craft at the ship's console with the video game joystick controller through a passing by space. We'll be good, pleads Orphantide in a cute manner. My daughter Taser and I mean no harm. Hi, says Taser, waving her little leaf arm with the wind. Your sneakiness has earned you the coattails of this exploration, agrees Faisy to the salmon's request. Orphantide excites and races over to the steering crow at the console and gives him the gift of a smashing thank you kiss. Faisy's nerves freak out into sludge. Orphantide rejoins next to her daughter Taser. Pay up, the salmon tells her baby flower. I won the bet. Taser hands over a couple bits of chocolate. She didn't think her mama could talk her way out of this one. I'm watching yous, adds Faisy, giving the two stowaways a distrustful peer. He monitors back to his driving, second shifted. Not too many moments later, Faisy crows out a warning. Blown speaker, losing power, shaky landing. Where are we landing, wonders Sticky the woodpecker, waving his string-wrapped broken wings. That red planet, cries out Faisy, watching the monitor screen that is set within the control panel. Hold on! The rest of the group scrambles over to the metal box that is used for the instrument weapons. Faisy turns the power off to the blown speaker portable radio. The powering down of the ship is felt by all its passengers. The silence by length said the best, splitting the wind with a gasping air. The planet Mars draws nearer. The crayon toy box glides towards the planet's surface and drifts itself down upon the red sand dunes, partly tilting on its left side like a nicely thrown paper airplane. Without complying to the preferred safe landing, a tempered gust of wind sweeps the spacecraft up and over the embankment, sending it tumbling down the other side. Faisy holds onto the steering joystick with his spider-webbed wings. The rolling crunch ceases. Inside the ship, all are safe. Each of them blooms without speaking a sound. Sticky's voice breaks in. Where are we? There's a sign outside that reads Crazy Horse, answers Faisy, viewing the video monitor screen. Something's wrong here. From over the top of the embankment curdles a crowd of wild natives known as the vulture. These canines have beaks instead of snouts. Some of these primitives are running on two legs, howling and throwing rocks at this foreign spacecraft that has just crash-landed. Faisy advises, grab the instrus for this just in case. Lim the Lotus Tripper opens the metal box and grabs him a bass guitar weapon with his branch arms. Clockworks the Falcon takes many small splash cymbals for throwing. Sticky pulls out a glowing blue double-horn guitar weapon. Faisy pulls out a megaphone with his beak and veers towards the door. Coat-tailers must stay here with the ship, commands the crow using the megaphone. Orphantide and Taser both frown at the same time. No bets were made. The hatch to the ship opens and out comes the scattering band, blazing their instruments. Musical note bullets blast out of both guitar weapons and burst on anything they hit with huge vibrating sound. Splash cymbals boomerang from there to here, slicing warnings into beasts and returning to Clockworks' wings. An intruding rock comes knocking at the Falcon's head, returning a slice for a slice. Faisy crows out a distracting war cry from out of the megaphone. The vultures suddenly retreat back to where they crawled from. All senses are spoiled in their disorientation. Back to the ship, says Faisy to the crew without using the megaphone. I'll prove my claim and find another radio to replace the peeled split one. The three others return back to guard the ship. Faisy takes a silent moment to give thanks to his great spirit for the immeasurable help. Then he disperses, treading through the red sand, putting 2 foot towards the voice behind his chest. Things hold different in the lease for Fazy as he comes across a small town. He notices an instrument weapons supply store ahead. It's open for any intake that has release. The crow steps in hoping to find a replacement for the broken radio that was left back at the toy box ship. The store is full of many different kinds of weapons to choose from, but it's seemingly empty when it comes to any buyers. Fazy hears a humming sound coming from the separate room that is used for trying out any of the weapon instruments. The crow enters the area as his ears catch a familiar tune about cavities being sung in a blue female voice by a warm, glowing figure. The all-inspired crow feels magnet. He waits for the finish and then cheers in amazement. "Thanks," says Lady Music, illuminating more of a white glow. "Unfortunately for me, as a being developing, my emotions remain blue." She dims to her previous blue color. "Do you lean towards spirits for any of your precautions?" inquires Fazy. Lady Music replies, "My broken heart is all I know or own." "Be patient," offers Fazy, "or be forsaken by your urges to control." "Goodbye," says the disappearing glow, her one word affecting Fazy by increasing his blood flow. Fazy bails out of the store in such a hurry that he almost collides with a wandering pigeon patrol officer. "Pardon me," respects Fazy to the officer. "Things hold different than that in a policed habitat." "What keeps you from walking in a straight line?" observes the pigeon cop, glancing at Fazy's megaphone, which the crow carries under his casted left wing like a football handler. "Minding my own," responds Fazy. "Minding your own is against our law," regulates the officer. "So is not walking in a straight line." "Forgive me," offers Fazy. "I'm only visiting." The officer grabs Fazy with all intentions of arrest. The megaphone drops to the ground. Before Fazy really figures out what is happening, the pigeon officer escorts the confused crow to the local jail. Otherwhile, inside the running jailhouse, there are multi-sized cages used to contain the steady flow of troublemakers. Fazy is directed in. He is designated a number and is placed in a corresponding white bird cage already occupied by a hanging upside-down sleeping bat. Fazy sulks into another collected lesson that resolves its origin of getting used to. The evening's red day erases. "What didn't you do?" asks the awakening bat of the crow. "I'm visiting on my way to Earth," says Fazy. "Earth?" perks up the questioning bat. "Why would you want to go there?" Fazy indulges. "I'm looking for some answers to a monster of a riddle." "I can help," squeaks the bat. "You must find somewhere the old moving picture kind of town when you get to Earth. Then, while buried under its molding, hope for your lasting answers that they may lead you through its gates. The password to these blocking gates is this." The bat unclenches, dropping himself down to the bottom of the cage, landing on his feet, and then he whispers the password to the crow's listening ear. "When do I use this password?" wonders Fazy. "When everything is in its place," assures the bat. Fazy abides, but still not quite really clear why. Keys rattle as the pigeon cop swings open the cage with both of his wings. "You are free to go, Crow," announces the officer. "It's given to receive," adds the bat. "Take it for what it is." Fazy jokes to the bat, "At least I will have reason to believe that you and I were not here." The bat smiles on the outside but cries out winter on the inside. On the way out, Fazy notices a radio on the officer's desk. He looks back at the distracted pigeon harassing the bat in its locked cage. Fazy takes it for what it is and steals the radio from the desk, unnoticed. He leaves the jail to measure his own broken stringed heart. Fazy returns to the crayon ship. Clockworks the Falcon is outside on guard. "It's good to see you," says Clockworks to a finalized Fazy. "Equal thoughts," graces the crow. "I was contained by a law-enforcing officer in town for not walking in a straight line." "That's absurd," coughs the Falcon. Fazy agrees. "The closer we get to Earth, the more controlled everything is becoming. At least I was able to find this radio at the jailhouse. A fair trade for my megaphone." They both go inside the ship quietly. The rest of the group are sleeping. Fazy goes directly to the console and plugs the new radio into the console's power port. Clockworks calmly awakens the others from their rest and informs them of their immediate launch. "Hold on to the fat on those asses," squawks Fazy as he turns the radio on. Shake, rattle, and zoom. "Hi," says Orphantide in a shy voice to Fazy as he steers the craft. "Hey," whispers the crow. The others are sleeping. "You seem rushed with your choices," continues the salmon. "How do you figure?" from Fazy. "Your pupils are raging," concerns Orphantide. Fazy undenies. I'm drawn potent to a check slash next to has no choice. The salmon winks both of her eyes continuously at the same time and says, "You're the same as me, magic guys, you just don't know it yet." Faisy admits, "I need to say that I'm a lousy stray like a magnificent knee swell or spilled water from its glass." Orphantide persists, "Aren't you glad that we hitched along with you?" "I admit a pull," confesses Faisy. "Admit that I rule," plays the salmon. "I'm onto you, crazy one," warns the crow. "Good," chuckles Orphantide the instigator. "Look," directs Faisy towards the monitor screen. "Earth." The hazel bluish white swirled marble planet moves closer. The center sun warms the west end half. "Should I tell the others?" asks Orphantide. "No need," says Faisy. "I've learned that I can lower the volume on the radio gradually. This causes the ship to land like a hovercraft. We can wake them up when we touch land." Orphantide agrees. Faisy starts to fade the music using his beak to lower the volume knob. The crayon toy box responds and floats down towards the Earth's surface and drops slowly into a city populace of vehicle traffic, dirty air, billboard buildings, and humans. The craft comes to a complete stop on top of one of the city's buildings. A white circular building that looks more like a stack of vinyl records piled up on top of each other. "Wake up," announces Faisy. The hatch to the ship opens and the awakened group comes out to take a curious look around. "Look at all those humans walking in rows," points out Sticky with one of his wrapped-up wings. Down below, a large crowd marches down the middle of the city's main street, protesting their government's ongoing war with another foreign territory. The crowd is armed only with picket signs, music, and each other's ideas. "Not in our name," chant the protesters. "What's that all about?" asks Taser the quinkadink flower to her mommy. "I'm not sure, baby," responds Orphantide. "Let's all go in closer and find out," suggests Faisy. The exploration persists. At the war protest below, a platform is set up with a microphone on its stand. A man takes the microphone in his hand and addresses the crowd. Hear ye, here's the latest sighting to the markings of our age. The televisions of the Transmit Conducive have tactic approach to watering your fear folds. So what else is news? It's in front of our faces. The devil with his forked tail holds the leash. It makes me wonder if these kings will ever cease. The crowd hollers in agreement to the man's collision opinion. The man continues, "Right now we decide what we will do for our to-be. What was has reshapened. None of us can figure this out. The shapers of our civilization are stirring in their rest. I raise my hand with a what, why, and when. How long will they keep our blood from us against our name?" He raises his fist to the sky. "Not in our name," chants the crowd in return. At this point, the space travelers have made their way from the white building that they hovered onto and down into a nearby tree. They perch, unnoticed, listening to the protester. "Here's to the greedy business of war," shouts the man on the platform, holding up a dollar bill. Faisy's eyes open wide, noticing the familiar bill. With the flame lighter, the protester burns the money to ash in front of the crowd. Faisy's eyebulbs light up. Faisy excites. "The leaves of Fear Wallow must be burned." "How?" asks Lim, the lotus tripper. "Let's ask the sun," proposes Faisy. Police sirens bring their distracting push, causing the crowd to scatter. This allows for the space travelers to track a path away from the commotion and back to the ship. As they pass through an alleyway, the Voyagers come across a huge iron gate barrier. A distracted Faisy stops and says, "These must be the gates of the moving picture city I was told about." "By who?" asks Clockworks the Falcon. "A bat prisoner I met in one of the jail cages on Mars," replies the crow. "He told me the password to the gate's restraint." "Let's see if the bat was speaking the truth," dares Lim. "I think enough of my questions are already answered here," avoids Faisy as he starts to walk away from the gates. The Lotus Tripper continues, "I will stay here and take the password through the gates." Faisy advises, "They will pull you up from your roots and turn you into food for flies." "My passions are willing," says Lim. Faisy walks back over to Lim, who is still standing by the gates. The crow whispers the password to the Lotus Tripper. "Respects," proffers Lim. "From the ground up," respects the crow as he hurries off. Orphantide, Taser, and Sticky go with Faisy. Clockworks the Falcon stays with Lim. The Lotus Tripper turns to the gates and says, "Pinch of a beetle." The gates open. Limb and Clockworks pass through the gates with their everything, filling the dots with the in-between in a time when a mistake became a glitch in its place of who knows where. Back up at the ship, its return passengers prepare for launch. Fazy grabs hold of the joystick controller with both casted wings. He checks the monitor screen and notices a peculiar crow perched outside on the same building waving one of its wings, as if it was wishing them good luck. Fazy nods to the fellow crow, even though the other bird can't see him. Taser runs over to the radio and alarms. Hold on to the fat on those asses. She turns the radio on full blast. Boom. It only takes instances now to get from there to here. Fazy approaches Fearwallow and buzzes right by the tree almost undetected. The tree's deadly vines swat out for the passing crow pest but miss their target. Fazy laughs at Fearwallow Tree, teasing the monster into a furious bother. Now the crow navigates his crayon-shaped transporter to hover over the Wallow River out of Anger's reach. Fazy now looks at the backside of the agitated terror. He hears the cries of many beings approaching closer from the land side. Airborne support is fully engaged as flocks and swarms of all sorts appear in the distant scapes. The surprised crow takes the biggest drum piece from out of the instrument weapon storage box and rolls out a huge vibrating sound, causing a cosmic reaction. Sonar waves travel down through the desert land, seeking deeply into the sand, causing all the hourglass traps to shatter into tiny pieces, blending into the sand as the glass once was. The red-coated ignorants are shaken from their hypnosis, their queen included. Bewildered, they march away from the battle, searching for filling food to answer their emptiness. This allows the ground attackers with their instrument weapons to advance closer without having to worry about the fiery ants and their sand trap surprises. Fearwallow Tree moves like slow motion as if in a dream. The wavelengths of the instrument weapons strike with whole note ammunition, paralyzing the snaky vines for moments at a time. A shining glimmer from the sanded ground gains Fazy's attention. He lowers the transporter just above the ground over by where the mysterious shine glows as if it were a star. Fazy sees that his curiosity has led him to a glass shard sticking out of the sand, reflecting the bright sun. Fazy reaches down with one of his still healing wings and takes a left hold of the broken glass piece. He attaches the glass bit to the webbing of his dream catcher as a spirit bead would be traditionally placed, and he returns to his higher post above the battle. The crow steadies his vehicle at a slanted angle and points his dream catcher in the direction of the Fearwallow Tree. Sunlight aligns its majesty to the glass piece attached to Fazy's dream catcher and passes through its webbing, creating a sunray fire net that covers Fearwallow completely with a burning blanket that singes the jealous-colored dollar bill leaves to ashes. The burning tree's vines lose their motive as they stutter to a settling limp. Fazy angles the dream catcher one last time, creating the sunray net that sets every last bit of Fearwallow Tree ablaze, its roots and the originally buried dollar bill included. The seasons release their ovations in full agreement.